Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Brown, vintner at Baca Wines, and welcome to Happy Hour, the show where great minds drink alike. Today, we have an incredible guest, the actress Marin Hinkle. She is one of the stars of the hit TV show, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Amazon Prime. I am such a fan of her in the show, and I cannot wait to speak to her in just a minute. Today, we're going to be tasting our Double Dutch Baca Zinfandel wine. And it's going to go incredibly with this conversation here today and any foods you might have at home. So feel free to crack open a bottle and drink along with us. Back at the winery, let me tell you what's going on there. We have a really exciting time. We're doing what we call our blending. And that's when we take all of our wine that's been aging in different sized barrels and we actually blend them together to form our finished wines. So it's an incredibly labor-intensive process, but it's one that's well worth the wait. Without further ado, I'd love to bring on Marin. Hey, Marin.
Hi, Jennifer. Hi, everyone.
So nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
So nice to meet you. Well, I do think first things first. I'm going to pass you this bottle of wine, and then we should cheers each other. What do you think?
I would love it. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So here I've got our Baca Double Dutch wine. I'm going to pass it through the internet.
Oh, here. Oh my God. I watched some of your other patrons on, and now I was able to do it myself. It's so magic. It's funny. There's magic on Maisel this past season, and there's a magician and all that. And when we were doing the magic, not much happened. But then in post, they add it all. So I've been watching it like, oh my God, look at that. People are floating. And of course, none of that happened. So anyway, you just made wine come through across the country. And I'm so delighted.
Well, hey, look, we're both in show business now. We're making magic happen through the internet.
Pour it and let it breathe for a moment and then bring it towards you all.
Yes. Well, cheers.
Cheers to you. Lovely.
Cheers to you.
I have a lot here. I guess I'm going to be drinking a lot.
I think you should. I'm going to pour a little more for myself in a minute. So, and cheers to everyone at home who's watching us.
You know, the first thing I'm going to ask you, Jennifer, because I'm really, as I told some of my friends, I feel like this is one of those nights I'm going to walk away with a great education.
I hope so.
Teach me the way that I know this glass is a little bit bigger than our lady, but what is the best way to hold it? Could you just educate me about this?
Any way you want to hold it is great. I'll just start with that. But I like to hold it at kind of the base of the stem.
Yeah.
And in general, usually you don't want to hold it by this part because it can warm up the glass.
Okay, got it. That's great.
So that's why I say to hold it at the bottom. And it also is easier to swirl. So if you think about swirling, I usually put it like on a flat surface and then I
do the swirl
it around. Exactly.
Great.
And then it can breathe a little bit. And when the wine interacts with oxygen, that's how it releases the flavor. So if you were to smell wine without swirling it, you won't smell very much. But then if you actually swirl it around, it releases the aromas into the air then. So
gorgeous. Okay, gorgeous. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Well, so do you like it?
I love it.
Oh, thank you. Well, we'll talk more about this wine in a minute, but I want to hear about you. I know you're in New York right now and you're filming the 5th season of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. How is filming going?
It's been, bittersweet in that we were told just as we started that this was our last season. And I think even until the very day that we all showed up for the read-through of that last season, I think we all thought that maybe somebody would kind of rush in and go like, no, hold the press. It's not happening. I think this group has become such a family. One can tell if you watch the show that we travel a lot. We've gone to Catskills, or we've gone to Paris, or we went to Florida. And I think we all sort of hoped that we would spend the rest of our lives as a family traveling the world, So I think that's been hard. But the great part of it is we love each other so much. We're each other's kind of greatest fans. And I'm excited to see someone like Rachel really came into her own in this show, and she's a superstar. Like in her heart, she's just such a leader, and in her soul and her artistry. And I'm excited to see all the different kinds of other work she'll do outside of playing this amazing character. And And so I guess you could say we all have to get ready to try on and don other hats.
Right.
We will miss each other so madly. And I will pray also that Amy and Dan, who run the show, will do something like they did for Gilmore Girls, which is like 5 years time. We'll all like reconvene, and then maybe they can do sort of another, 10 years later kind of thing.
Oh
So,
gosh, I really hope so because I have loved every second of this show. I know it's only been 4 seasons that I've been able to see, but it seems like you guys have gone through so much in those 4 seasons. I mean, your character alone has gone through such a transformation from the first season, really being fixated on her daughter, finding a man, being married. And then I loved the third season where you really took on this sort of air of independence, going to Oklahoma to fight that male board. And then at the end, the advice you gave to Midge was just incredible. How was that character transformation for you?
it's
What's
such a
that been like?
thank you. That's such a great question. In some ways, it probably mirrors not just my own life. I'm in my mid 50s, which I believe is probably the age of Rose. I know, she had a daughter probably earlier than when I had my own son. But I feel like I also am ready. My son is about to depart for college. And just like I think Rose was feeling, in the way Amy and Dan, who write it, must have, have insight about women of this age, is you get to a point when the kids are off, and particularly she watches her daughter become someone that she does not want her to be. I mean, this whole
Right.
idea of stand-up comedic stuff is just, as she says, it's almost as close to, like pornography or something. It's so hard for Rose to tolerate. But I do think that Rose's desire to say no, I don't want to rely on a man, which is what the particular
Right.
scene you just were talking about was about. She was basically like, you and I don't agree on a lot, she says to her daughter, but where we do agree is we cannot just rely on the whims of
The whims of the man. That's right.
man. And I do think that there's part of me too in my life that is learning from the independent streak that my son is having, and that I'm
Mhm.
finding myself having a hard time with, because I just want to be there, like enmeshed in his life, the way that Rose, I think, needed to have Midge. And I think the more that Midge was like, okay, I'm bonding with a lot of other different types, like her relationship with Susie, I think almost, if Rose were to know about that, she'd be threatened by this extraordinary closeness that Miriam has found to someone other than to Rose herself. But
Mhm.
that's what happens, right? I mean, you're a mom yourself, Jennifer, right? And
Yes.
you have a great relationship with your mom, but we definitely need to fly away from our moms sometimes. So I think, in answer to your great question, I think that Rose needed to find something that was more for her.
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
that there were a lot of women of a particular age that came up to me when they watched it, and they said, you know what, she inspires me. And I was like, go to Paris, guys.
Oh
Just go
gosh.
away and do it. If you can afford, if you can hop on a plane, or go to, someplace else in this country you've never visited, and sort of like seek it out in a private way that doesn't take all of the support system you have with you. So I love that that's what Rose is like. She's having a rebirth.
Mhm. Well, that makes sense that people would come up to you and say it was inspiring because it was inspiring for me to watch. And speaking of France,
Yes.
I heard you speak French so naturally on the show, but I did read that you didn't speak French before you
No, it
joined the
was a
show.
it was a sweet moment. I was, we have a hiatus of a few months, and you're always excited and waiting to hear anything, any news that will come about what is going to happen in the following season. So I got this little tidbit from a producer that was like a phone call saying, "Do you speak French?" Which is just such a fun question. And I went, I certainly can if you want me to. And I had taken a little in high school, and they said, "All right, we're going to send you a tutor." And I was like, that's fantastic. And then the tutor entered my life, but she didn't know what to do, except we were conjugating verbs and doing nouns, but they never gave me a script until literally the night before we started heading to Paris. And I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
I had to call that wonderful tutor the night that we got the script and say, okay, you have to give me, if it's okay, 24 hours of like cram lessons, because all we had done is gone like, je veux, or tu veux, or like,
Really?
new allons or something. And it was really delightful when I actually got to Paris. I just took one of these, my cameras and my phones, and just taped everyone around me. And I would go to sleep listening and praying
Oh,
for my
that's
osmosis.
smart.
I was just letting myself take in the beautiful energy of the language.
Well, you took it on really well
Thank
because I would never have known, I really did believe that you studied college or lived in France in
Thank
college with your
you.
character.
Thank you. Do you speak French? You said
Yes,
you lived abroad, so I bet you do actually speak other languages.
I speak French and I speak some German. German's probably my best language. But I think French is one of the most beautiful languages ever. I love hearing it spoken and I think it's beautiful. My problem in France is that I think people can tell that I'm American. It's probably because I smile so much. I'm not sure. Um, but literally, I will walk into a restaurant and not even open my mouth, and
And
they
no,
will speak to me English. Like I won't even say a thing. And I think it's and I asked a French person this, why do they assume I'm American? And they said it's because you smile, which I
that's
thought was so funny. Because I think if I was really a Parisian, I would walk in and be like,
yeah, no, they'll have the kind of look on the face. There's something, you're right. There's something in the
yes,
way the mouth moves with that language that has like kind of like a little, I don't want to say haughty because that's mean, because they're not, I don't want to be
no,
critical, but it has like a lovely strength, shall we say,
yes,
this like
yes,
very, very open, vulnerable spirit. So perhaps there's that. And then I will say this, I did notice that they dress, but I can tell you're an amazing dresser, but they have that, like, the woman that was kind of helping tutor me, the way she would wear sweaters and scarves. And I know that's such a cliche, but it's almost like it's this old worn thing that like you throw on that nothing looks better than that.
yes.
So I guess that's another way we can fool people there is we have to like do some sort of ripped sweater and scarf and just like make the hair a little disheveled because there is that kind of French kind of
Yes.
like smoke, let me have this all going. And then, it's like, I'm just taking everything off. I'm just about to like take a shower or just have sex or something,
Yeah, no, that's 100% correct. It's like disheveled, but also like extremely elegant at the same time.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
What was your preparation for the character of Rose like? Or are you always constantly preparing for it?
Thank you. Another great, great question. I feel very far in many ways from who Rose is. I was
Mhm.
brought up in an incredibly practical family in which the two women in the house were my mother and myself, and then I have a brother and my father. And my mom she's a judge, and there's a sense about her that like the accoutrement that some people have, like she's not really into that very much. So
Mhm.
when I was preparing for this character, I decided to kind of open up to the idea of the artistry of how one presents oneself. You know what I mean? Like I
Mhm.
let myself go to a costume shop, and rather than go to the audition and just wear like a simple dress, I was like, I'm going to have this boa, because the words that described my character in the first scene of the first part of the pilot was, she enters the room as if in her own MGM musical. And
Oh,
I kind of had to think that way. And I think my character actually had like a robe and a boa on. So I actually borrowed someone's robe and I sewed on a boa and I put on a wig. And I really did no apologies to the amount of presentation. And that's not how I treat many of my auditions. Many of my auditions are just kind of half myself walking into a room. But I really wanted to like be far from Marin and
mhm.
embrace somebody from another time who has a really different kind of perspective on self. I was just like, well, who was I just listening to the other day? Oh, Will Smith was talking about how the movie that he's just done,
The King Richard one?
Richard, part of the way, this is so much fun, that part of the way he found character was to put on those very, I guess, short shorts. I haven't seen the film yet.
Yes, he wears very short tennis shorts.
Short shorts, and he said as soon as he got them on, it made him feel like, no apologies, I am showing off my legs. And that's kind of like how I guess there's little keys
Mm,
Rose, like when she puts on a hat, like I
mhm,
feel like she knows people are looking at her. And I'm
mhm.
sort of a person in life which is like, oh, you don't have to look. It's actually easier if you don't. But with Rose, there's sort of like, oh, no, no, look, take me seriously.
Definitely.
That has been a wonderful challenge, but something that was actually a key into finding the characters. Is as soon as she enters a room, she kind of looks around as if she's waiting for everybody to notice her.
Oh, that's very true. I mean, your character is very regal.
Yes,
Very, and I get that, your own MGM show. You
yes,
definitely seem that way. Well, and
yes.
the show is so theatrical too that makes perfect sense to me.
It does. Amy and Dan have a gift. Well, they have a million gifts, but they understand music and dance. Amy comes from a dance background as well as, I think her mom was a dancer. Her dad was a stand-up comic himself. And Dan has this extraordinary past understanding of music. So sometimes when we shoot, they bring in these beautiful, like people that are singing. I mean, not in real life, but they've taped them. And I'm thinking Sutton Foster is one of their beautiful, darling performers. And so all of a sudden we'll hear some great music with Sutton singing it in the background. And if we're supposed to walk through the city streets of New York, you'll hear that on a loudspeaker. And that's kind of the backdrop of how you can get into character. And then later, if they're lucky enough to get the rights for it, then we get to have those great performers that actually are in the, their music is also in the show.
Well, that makes sense that they have or she has that background, because it's so theatrical. So I feel like I'm at a live show when I watch it. And I read too that Marvelous Mrs. Maisel has really perfected the long shot. And I hadn't thought about that before, but it makes sense. Some of my favorite scenes are ones that you feel like you're right there walking through a room with no cuts. But I wanted to ask you, as an actor, I imagine those long shots are very difficult to prepare for.
They are. I have a dancer background. When I was little, I was a little kind of baby ballerina, and then I got injured when I was 16. And I haven't really in my theater life done as much that is as similar to dancing as the way Amy and Dan have created those long shots. And so it's this choreography in which they bring in all of the camera operators and all of the crew. Everybody has a place as if it's being a choreographed dance number. And so let's say often you've probably noticed that the characters like even twirl around, and like the way that the shot is that the DP is like walking around with the light and the camera. And so it's choreographed within sort of the inch of its life. And so we've rehearsed it over and over and over. And then there will be, as they call it, no coverage. So you're going to just see one shot, and that one shot has to work perfectly. If anyone like screws up a line or screws up where they were supposed to stand, then all of a sudden the shot's done. And you're like, okay, we got to start over again. And it's a lot of pressure, but it's also kind of like being in a marathon, and you have like the finish line. And when you get to it, you kind of, if you have the last couple seconds of the scene and it's gone really, really well, you feel your breath and you feel kind of excited by it and your heart is racing. And then when it finishes, it's like a whole kind of like, we did it. And then Amy may say something like, it wasn't fast enough. And then you have to sort of start it all over again. But I love it. It's a way in which most of the television I did has this whole thing we're looking at right now is a lot of the face. What I appreciate is that so much of who we are, I feel like I've got almost, so much person that uses my hands and the rest of my body. And Amy really values the way that bodies tell stories, not just somebody's face. And that's, for a woman of a certain age, that's actually lovely, because as much as, I want to make peace with my face getting older, I also like that other parts of my body get to express themselves. So.
Absolutely. I hadn't really thought about that before, but it's true, because when you're editing, they're doing a lot of close-ups, like juxtaposed with like the full shots probably, right? Whereas if it's one long shot, you see your whole body in movement.
Yeah. I also think Amy and Dan, I just came to realize this within the last sort of years, I think they're not sentimentalists. Like there aren't that many scenes that have people sort of, how we watch many film and TV productions and lots of sort of tears are coming down and there's sort of soft music and there's a lot of feeling. Amy and Dan kind of want people to feel things by sort of it passing through and told like, or spoon-fed to an audience, like you got, time for you to feel something. And so I think a lot of feelings come out from face, but like if you show something in a farther way distance, it actually keeps it more as if it's a very honest way we all approach life. I appreciate that. It wasn't the way I was used to in a lot of my other work. And so when I first got there, I think I was like holding and thinking the camera was going to do a close-up the way it is on like Law and Order or what have you, But there isn't any of that on this show. There's no sort of like moving in for the close-up. None of that.
Right. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. So many shows really prepare you for crying with all of their music and everything. But I've also noticed in your show that even when you do have these sentimental moments, there's usually like a quip right afterwards or a joke right afterwards.
You're right. I think Amy and Dan also believe that some of the most poignant times in life, you think it's going to be all sad, but there's like humor to it, as well. I remember it's sort of a odd memory, but I remember I was at my grandmother's funeral, and it was the first funeral I'd ever been to. And I remember people were laughing because there was something going on with trying to get like the rings off, or so there was something like that. And I remember thinking at the time that I wanted to yell to everybody, like, stop it, there can be no humor. And then I realized that the levity was needed. We needed to, like, we were so sad and we needed to all like bond with laughter. And at a number of other funerals in my life I've been to, I've noticed the exact same thing. Like, you can't sometimes stomach just having one emotion. You sometimes have to have like a complicated, convoluted balancing of emotions, right? And similarly in last season, you know, there was this amazing funeral. I don't want to give too much away for those that haven't watched it yet. You've seen it, but there's this moment where Alex kind of goes on, and it's one of the funniest juxtaposed with the saddest scenes ever, right? Like, you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Amy and Dan just like, they know that balance, and that's human life, isn't it? That's what Chekhov wrote about. It's like, it's comedy and it's tragedy, and it's all kind of intertwined.
Oh, well, that was so beautifully said. And that's life, that we need both. Well, switching subjects to a separate comedy that you were on, but very different show. You're also super well known for 2.5 Men, where you were the wife of the brother of Charlie Sheen.
That's
And
right.
I was not an avid watcher, but I did watch several episodes, and I remember thinking that you were very funny.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about the differences in being on a hit show
Yes.
on network television versus now on a streaming show? Sort of
Yeah.
uh, how that difference has been for you.
It's funny. I think I was so new to comedy. As I said, I came from a background where everything was quite serious, and academia was very
Right.
intense, and you kind of you positioned yourself. You're going to college, and I think that when I was cast on 2.5 Men, I honestly thought, like, has there been a mistake? Like, how did I get here? And Charlie and John Cryer are so funny, and the young boy, and all of them, Conchata, who bless her soul has passed, and Holland Taylor, Melanie Linsky. It was this cast of like comic geniuses. And one of the things I realized is we all have a funny bone. We're all like, even the most serious folks in the whole world are, if you get the writing to them, and they can just speak like brilliantly funny lines. And so all I had to do was trust the great Chuck Lorre on that show, who was just giving me the lines, and I was just there to say them. And once I started kind of stopping the worry, because a lot of comedy is confidence. You're insecure, the audience feels it and sniffs that. And so I guess what I could say about the difference between that show and the one I'm doing is that if I got nervous, the studio audience was there watching. We don't have a studio audience for Maisel. We just do it in the small compartment of our own little crew. But there you actually have hundreds of people that are brought in to laugh. And it's really kind of closer to theater that in that way, that you have to actually give it out with an understanding that they're going to give back their energy. So it was a different experience. I was definitely really I think it went for 12 years. I was the last few years when Ashton was brought on, I wasn't on it quite as much, but I think I spent like much of it pinching myself going like, I can't believe I'm in a comedy. You know, I was so pleased. And I remember my father was actually in a hospital at one point, and I remember kind of walking down the hallway and looking in to peer in to find him. And a number of people were watching 2.5 Men, and they were maybe in a hard place in their life, and they were laughing. And like, getting back on an airplane after visiting him. And again, like, I wasn't watching the show myself, but I was watching others watch American Airlines.
Very surreal.
And I remember watching people like laugh so much, and the value of having a sitcom and the levity that it provides to people that are in pain. There's nothing like it. And I felt so fortunate to be on it. But to be honest, the intricacies of this character are much more kind of complicated, and Rose grows in ways that are so surprising to me. And each time I come on set and they hand me a new script, I'm like, what? I get to do something crazy. Whereas on 2.5 Men, the comedy had a familiarity that makes people laugh because they know what they're getting. And that's like a good meal to them. And so if you're like the splash of color, like orange, you're probably orange like the next week too. You know what I mean? So it was a very different thing. But one thing I want to say is that I loved the young boy on it, whose name was Angus T. Jones. And he was, talk about confidence. He was only like 8 when he did the pilot. And then by the time we finished, he was like 20. And he turned to me. We were always at the front door, and we would knock, and because I was playing the divorcee and who didn't really come in the house much. And he would look at me and I'd be so shaking, nervous, holding my bag, and he was like, "What are you nervous about?" And I was like, "I don't know. I could learn, my lines could go out the window and people could not laugh." And he was like, "You're going to be fine." And like that kind of confidence that children have.
Mm,
And
mm,
my son was younger at the time. I remember thinking, like, that's what we have to just take in this world is like, if you believe in yourself,
mm.
soar. And that young boy like taught me so much more about learning to be a great performer. I miss him. I miss the cat.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible that he had such confidence and
He did. And he was leading a very unusual life because he wasn't going to school and he was
right.
doing a lot of like the set school. And so I would watch all that, like, how can he be so wise? But he was definitely wise beyond his years. And he was never nervous, not once. And he always had his lines like perfectly. And if they ever weren't perfect, they were even funnier than what was written.
Wow. It sounds like he chose the right career for himself
Yeah,
then.
he did.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think one of the amazing things that you get to do as an actress is tell stories. And I think that's something that we have in common. I'm in the wine business and we get to tell the story of the vineyard where the wine comes from. So maybe we could talk a little bit about this wine that we're tasting here today.
I would
So
love you to talk. Tell me more about it, please.
great. Okay. So we call this wine Double Dutch, and it comes from a vineyard. Let me show you a picture. It
Please.
comes from a vineyard in Paso Robles. I'm not sure if you've been to the Paso Robles area, but it's in Southern California, and it gets very warm during the day and very cool at night. And that's really important in great wine regions because the warmth during the day gives ripeness of flavor to the fruit, but then the cool breezes preserve the acidity. So it keeps the wine tasting bright and fresh, which we really like in our wines. And in particular, I love the story of this vineyard. So we're a family winery. My grandparents were first grape growers in my family. My mom took that to the next level by starting a wine business. I work with her, and we work with many families that also own their vineyards. And so this family is now in their fifth generation. They're called the Ducey family. And they this vineyard is over 100 years old, and it's been farmed in much the same way that it's always been farmed in. So they're an Italian American family, um, and they came over from Italy. And much like my grandparents, were thinking about what kind of business they wanted to be in and decided to be in the wine business. And so they planted these vines about 100 years ago. And Zinfandel is really an incredible grape because unlike Cabernet or Pinot Noir that only lasts about 20 years or so before you have to renew the vines, Zinfandel grows naturally for a long period of time. So it has this really rich history where it comes from. And let's see if I have any other pictures of some of their original family picking these grapes back in the day. But we get to make this wine and preserve the history of this family, but still make it in a modern way, which I'm very grateful for.
I was going to say, do you guys feel that over the years you've tasted versions of it that are considerably older than what now? And has it quite altered in scope or not so much?
I think that every vintage is different. When you're bottling, one of the amazing things about wine is when you're bottling a vintage, it's in capturing everything from that time and place. So, what flavors were in the air, what the soil was like that year, whether there was a drought or heavy rain and that kind of thing. And so I think that it would be different regardless.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that our winemaking style is different than the way it used to be a long time ago, because we have some really amazing pieces of technology that can be more precise in making sure that we're only getting the freshest fruit, which does make a difference in the wine itself. So
was there in the older time, was there a bitterness sometimes because the fruit wasn't preserved the same way it is now?
I think there was some bitterness. I also think that you would pick the whole cluster, and then and then ferment all the grapes that came off the cluster. You wouldn't be doing as much sorting, and then especially raisins can give like an overly sweet flavor that is not our style. But I think that because we're able to remove some of the raisins in particular, that makes a big difference in the wine.
Is the family that you just showed me, so I love those pictures, they're amazing. I actually come from an
Yes.
Italian background too, and I was just
Oh,
the families. And it is that family, had they actually been in the wine business even in Italy prior to even coming to the States, do you know? Or did they
you know, that I don't know if they were in the wine business in Italy. I'll have to ask them.
Mhm.
They're wonderful people. We're so glad to be partners with them. I'll have to get back to you.
Please, I'd love to see even more pictures of that stuff. You know, it's funny, I have kind of, I say to my son, I have peasant's hands and peasant's feet, and I don't know, that sounds so funny, but I definitely don't have elegant fingers. I
Oh, I
the
totally
thing that Rose does. I mean, they put false nails and all that stuff on me and nice nail polish. But what I was gonna say is I always say that I think I must have been in another life I worked on in a winery because I think there's something about like, or at least I know I was a farmer because I
Yeah.
feel like there's something in my hands that looks like farmers' hands. So when you were just showing this
Let me see your hands. I'll tell you.
Paris, they definitely
Oh
have
yeah,
teeth,
definitely.
they have sort of knobs to them, and
Oh no, they're elegant though. They're
oh,
elegant
it's
but
so sweet.
strong. I can
It's
tell.
so sweet. So is that family that you just showed me, even like the grandparents had worked with you guys? You've been conjoined for years?
Yes, we've been working actually not that long. So we've only been making wine with them for about 5 years.
Okay.
But we have other vineyard partners that we've been working with for a lot longer.
Great.
So my family started a wine brand called Hall a long time ago, and we
Yes.
have another brand called Walt. And then I personally started Baca about 5 years ago. So when I started Baca, which mostly does Zinfandel, I went out looking for some great heritage vineyards around California with our winemaking team. And that's how we found the Ducey family because they're really one of the pioneers of old vine Zinfandel in California. So we've only been working together for, a short period of time, but it feels like we've known each other for a long time.
And then, so your mom was brought up. I was sort of doing some research about this. She was
Yes.
brought up it with her own parents had a vineyard too.
Yes. My grandparents had vineyards up in Mendocino County, which is farther north in California. And they grew a number of different grapes, but one of them was actually Zinfandel.
Uh-huh.
And when we started Baca, which means berry in Latin, and I love history, um, Zinfandel is really the quintessential historical California grape. And so we chose that name to signify that. And then for me personally, it's significant because it's kind of bringing it full circle for me and my family that they originally grew these grapes and we get to make it now again.
I
So
love that. Do you have pictures then of your mom as a little girl running around? And
we do. We
yeah,
do have pictures.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now your daughters are doing the same.
I have so many more pictures of my kids, obviously, because I take photos on my iPhone all the time.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sweet.
Um, well, let me tell you a little bit. So
Yes.
that's a little bit of the history. So let's taste it real quick. But so quintessential for Zinfandel is black cherry and black pepper. And I often get those flavors in this wine, but tell me what you think.
It's interesting. When I first tasted it, there was like a peppery feeling, and I was thinking, I wonder if that's something that I am allowed to say. Yeah, it's
Yes.
beautiful, and I understand, and the cherryness I also taste as well.
No, I think you're exactly right that there's a little bit of spice in this wine. And I think that it helps it pair with lots of kinds of foods, but in particular, foods with a little bit of spice. Like it would go great with Thanksgiving, anything that's kind of like your traditional baking spice type, like think pumpkin pie or other kinds of dishes that have a little bit of spice in them, but not overly spicy. Um, it's just a great overall food wine, and I'm so glad to enjoy it with you.
Delicious.
Wonderful. Well, this time has gone by so fast.
Oh gosh, it's already, oh my gosh.
I
Oh,
know.
I feel like I talked too much. I wanted to ask you all more questions, but I guess I can't really magically hear the rest of the people that watch this, but I guess I'll have to imagine the questions and say,
Well, we do but I do have something I want to ask you. But before
"Yeah,
that, we do have a couple fun comments from people that are watching that we'd like to share with you. Hi, Marin. I love watching you on Mrs. Maisel and enjoy my membership at Hall. A great match. Oh,
oh,
but she knew you when. And
Oh, in my high school class. Oh, I know exactly who that is. Hi, Donna. That's incredible. Oh my God. It's wonderful when that happens. That we like, I guess that's one of the best parts about technology. There's parts of technology that are just like over my head, but the
yeah.
idea that people actually can connect to those that we grew up to. And I grew up with this lovely woman. So hello, that's so nice. Thank you.
Oh, cheers, Donna. And then
Cheers, Donna. Enjoy the wine.
I know. Lily Martinez. Hi, Marin. I'm such a big fan of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. You are amazing at Rose. Greetings from Mexico.
Oh, I love that. Well, greetings to Mexico. It's a place that I need to visit. I've only been there once in my life. It was a very short visit. And I feel like during the pandemic, I wasn't able to get anywhere, but that's one of my notes to self is get to Mexico. Child goes to college, go to Mexico and enjoy life.
That sounds like a recipe for success. For
Yeah,
sure.
the food is incredible there and the wine will be too, I know.
Mm.
So cheers to that.
Cheers to that. Well, thanks for guys for commenting. Okay, I have about 10 questions for you, Marin.
Love them. Okay.
We'll do them rapid fire. And the concept here is would you rather? So I'll give you two alternatives and you tell me which one you'd rather. And it can be the first thing that comes to you. Don't think too much about it. Okay. And they're very highbrow questions. Let me tell you. Heels or flats?
Oh, so flats.
New York or Paris?
Oh my God, almost tied, but I'm going to have to say Paris.
1960s or 2020s?
I would miss everybody if I was in the 60s. So let's say 20s.
Red lip or nude lip?
I think red.
New England clam chowder or Manhattan clam chowder?
New England. I love these questions.
Yoga or running?
Oh, running. I mean, I feel like I should say yoga because it's easier on the body, but the truth is I'm like not so good at yoga.
Beach or mountains?
You know, California offers both, and you know that from living out there. So that's like a total tie. But I grew up on the East Coast where the beaches of Cape Cod were sort of like an emotional touchstone. So I think the people in New England would look at me like, what? You can't be betraying us by going to the West Coast. So let's say beach because I don't want to get anyone mad.
I like it. Shy Baldwin or Harry Styles?
Oh God, this is so funny that I'm going to admit this. Well, first of all, Shy Baldwin is incredible. Leroy was amazing at the job, incredible. But you just went to like a part where I think I'm like it's either the wine or just the whole notion of the word Harry Styles that just is going to make me blush. Harry Styles is incredible. So let's put a tie so we don't hurt anyone's feelings. Harry, I would love to meet you and I'd love to have you on the show. We'll have to talk to his girlfriend about that because I don't know how she is about him doing other work, but I think we need a little Miriam and Harry to meet.
Yeah, I agree. Read the book or watch the movie?
Oh, read the book.
Yeah. And then lastly, wine or martini?
Oh, well, definitely wine. Yes.
I love it. Cheers. Cheers.
Yeah, right.
Marin, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. I know you have so many fans out there watching you. Do you have any last thoughts for people?
You are a delight to talk to. This is, I really feel like one of the best things about being an actor, you said this about storytelling, is you get to open yourself up to new experiences. And I've always been a person, to be totally honest, that's intimidated by wine because I didn't really grow up knowing much. And I haven't taken the time to educate myself. But with a child going off to college, I've got a lot of time on my hands and I have a lot of good wine, the Hall wine and your wine and all of the wine. So I am now toast to like a new education in wine. So thank you for introducing me to it.
Well, come visit me in person and we'll do more education.
As long as you let me help your children, because I'm thinking of adopting new kids. I'm gonna become a matchmaker like Rose, and I'm gonna adopt. And then I'm gonna drink a lot of wine.
That sounds incredible, but I think we can help each other in that regard then. Perfect.
Thank you so much. Okay, cheers to everybody watching Maisel. Really appreciate that.
Thanks. Well, what a delight. I'm going to try not to fangirl over here. Marin is just an incredible actress and human being. What a pleasure to be able to talk to her about her show. Thanks all of you guys for tuning in today. If you don't follow us already, make sure to follow us at Baca Wines, Hall Wines, and Walt Wines. And be sure to watch our next happy hour that we have coming up soon. My name is Jennifer Brown, and cheers to your next adventure and the wine that finds your glass.